The annual Parker family reunion was in full swing at my aunt's sprawling estate when my cousin Madison's voice cut through the chatter. "Oh look, Olivia finally made it. Still working as a secretary, sweetie." I smoothed down my simple black dress, Chanel, though they'd never recognize that, and forced a smile. If only they knew that tomorrow morning I'd be signing the papers to acquire both Madison's tech startup and my other cousin Trevor's investment firm. "Still at Thomson Corp," I replied quietly, accepting a glass of champagne. The same Thomson Corporation that I secretly own through a complex web of shell companies and private equity firms. I'm Olivia Parker, though in certain circles I'm known as OP Holdings, one of the most aggressive and successful private equity investors in the country. But to my family, I'm just the disappointing cousin who never lived up to her potential. Trevor, dressed in an expensive but poorly fitted suit, clapped me on the shoulder. "You know, Liv, I could probably find you something better. My firm is always looking for good administrative support." I sipped my champagne to hide my smile. His firm, Parker Capital, was already mine, he just didn't know it yet. I'd spent the last year quietly buying up shares through various shell companies. "That's so kind of you," I said mildly, watching him preen at his own generosity. 8 years ago, when our grandfather passed away, everyone expected his fortune to be split equally among his grandchildren. Instead, he left specific bequests. Trevor got his investment firm, Madison received seed money for her tech startup, and I got what everyone thought was the booby prize: his old office downtown and a modest trust of $250,000. Poor Olivia, they'd whispered at the will reading. She always was his favorite. Shame he didn't leave her something more substantial. What they didn't know was that Grandpa's modest office building sat on top of old property records worth millions. He'd spent years quietly acquiring land rights and mineral claims across the city. More importantly, he taught me everything he knew about building wealth quietly, patiently, without drawing attention. "You're like me, Olivia," he'd said during our secret Sunday afternoon lessons. "You understand that true power doesn't need to announce itself." Now, watching my family mingle in their designer clothes and flash their expensive watches, I thought about how right he'd been. Every one of them had squandered their inheritances on visible displays of wealth, while I had turned my worthless office building into an empire. "Olivia, darling," my Aunt Patricia swooped in, air-kissing my cheek. "We missed you at the country club last weekend." Madison was telling us all about her company's latest success. Madison preened. "We just closed another round of funding. $10 million. Not that you'd understand the complexities of tech investment, Olivia." I thought about the documents waiting on my desk, showing how her company had actually lost money for the third quarter in a row. The $10 million was a desperate attempt to keep the lights on. And tomorrow, she'd learn that the mysterious investor behind the fund was me. "Sounds fascinating," I murmured. Trevor jumped in, never one to let his cousin hog the spotlight. "Parker Capital just acquired 3 new startups. We're projecting billion-dollar returns by next quarter." I knew better. His firm was hemorrhaging money, making increasingly risky investments to cover mounting debts. That's why my quiet takeover had been so easy. Desperate people make careless decisions. "How wonderful for you both," I said, meaning it more than they knew. Their desperation had played perfectly into my plans. My cousin Ethan, the family's self-appointed financial guru, wandered over. "Still pushing papers at Thomson, Liv? You know, it's never too late to make something of yourself. Look at Madison and Trevor. They're out there building empires." If he only knew that the papers I pushed included acquisition documents for half the properties in downtown Boston. That Thomson Corp, under my secret leadership, had quietly become one of the largest property holders in 3 states. "We can't all be entrepreneurs," I said softly, thinking of the network of companies I controlled through OP Holdings. My empire made their ventures look like corner lemonade stands. The afternoon wore on, a parade of subtle digs and condescending advice. I sat through it all, playing my part as the quiet underachiever. Even when my mother joined in, lamenting how I'd wasted my business degree by becoming a secretary, I maintained my calm facade. "Have you even tried to advance your career?" she asked, concern dripping from every word. "I'm sure Trevor could help. He's doing so well with Grandpa's old firm." I thought about the meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. where Trevor would learn that his firm's mysterious majority shareholder was his underachieving cousin. "I'm comfortable where I am, Mom." Madison, overhearing, laughed. "Comfortable? Oh, honey, you should want more than comfortable. My company's about to revolutionize the tech industry. We're raising another round of funding next month." From OP Holdings, Trevor cut in. "They're the biggest player in private equity right now. Very mysterious, but they seem interested in both our companies." I hid my smile behind my champagne glass. OP Holdings, my careful construction of shell companies and private trusts, had spent years building a reputation for aggressive but anonymous acquisitions. Tomorrow, the mystery would end. "I've heard of them," I said carefully. "Quite the portfolio they're building." As if he'd know anything about high-level business dealings, Madison sniffed. "Stick to filing papers. Live. Leave the real business to those of us who understand it." Before I could respond, my aunt called everyone to dinner. I found myself seated between Trevor and Madison, listening to them compete over who had the more impressive business empire. "Parker Capital is about to close the biggest deal in our history," Trevor boasted, cutting into his steak. "Once OP Holdings signs on, we'll be unstoppable." Madison rolled her eyes. "Please, my tech platform is going to make your traditional investment firm look prehistoric. In fact, OP Holdings is more interested in my company than yours. If they only knew that both their companies were already mine, their futures decided in quiet meetings and careful legal maneuvers over the past year." Speaking of business, my mother chimed in from across the table. "Olivia, dear, have you thought about taking some night classes? Maybe get an MBA. It's not too late to start a real career." I thought about my real office, the one no one in my family had ever seen, with its view of the city skyline and the wall of acquisitions that had built my fortune. "I'm fine where I am, Mom." "That's the problem with you, Liv," Trevor said, shaking his head. "No ambition. No drive. Grandpa would be so disappointed." I touched the small key I wore on a chain around my neck, the key to Grandpa's old office, where I'd started building my empire. "I think Grandpa understood me better than you know." The conversation shifted to the latest family gossip, but I caught bits and pieces of Trevor and Madison's worried whispers. Both were counting on tomorrow's meeting with OP Holdings to save their struggling companies. Neither suspected that their savior in their downfall would be the cousin they'd spent years underestimating. As the evening wound down, I made my excuses to leave early. "Big day at work tomorrow," I said, prompting more condescending smiles. "Don't work too hard filing those papers," Madison called after me, laughing at her own joke. In my car, a modest Audi that concealed its armored exterior, I called my assistant. "Is everything ready for tomorrow?" "Yes, Ms. Parker. The contracts are prepared and the board members have been notified. Your cousin's companies won't know what hit them." I drove home to my penthouse apartment, decorated not with showy artwork like Madison's place or pretentious antiques like Trevor's, but with the simple elegance Grandpa had taught me to appreciate. In my home office, I reviewed the documents one last time. Tomorrow, OP Holdings would reveal its true identity, and my family would learn that their underachieving cousin had built something far greater than they could imagine. I picked up the photo on my desk, the last one taken of Grandpa and me in his office. He was smiling that knowing smile of his, the one that said he saw something in me that others missed. "The best success," he used to say, "is the kind they never see coming until it's too late." Tomorrow, my family would understand exactly what he meant. The morning after the reunion, I arrived at the Thompson Corp headquarters early, not in my usual secretary attire, but in a custom-made power suit that cost more than Madison's car. My assistant, Sarah, met me in the private elevator. "Both your cousins are already here," she reported, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Madison's been asking for coffee every 10 minutes, and Trevor's pacing the conference room like a caged animal." "Nervous habits," I observed. "They know their companies are in trouble. They just don't know how much." The conference room occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Trevor and Madison sat on opposite sides of the massive table, both trying to look confident and failing. Their lawyers flanked them, looking considerably more concerned. "What's she doing here?" Madison demanded when I walked in. "This is a private meeting with OP Holdings." Trevor nodded. "Olivia, I know you mean well, but this is far beyond your understanding." Why don't you get us some coffee while we wait for the real executives? I set my briefcase on the table, enjoying the moment. Actually, I think you'll find I understand the situation perfectly. Sarah began distributing folders to everyone in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please review the documents before you. You'll find complete documentation of OP Holdings' ownership of both Parker Capital and Madison Tech, along with the proposed merger terms. The color drained from Trevor's face as he read. Madison's hands began to shake. This has to be a mistake, she whispered. OP Holdings is your Olivia Parker. I finished for her, taking my seat at the head of the table. Founder and CEO of OP Holdings, majority shareholder of Thomson Corp., and as of this morning, the new owner of both your companies. Trevor slammed his hand on the table. This is impossible. You're a secretary. No, I corrected him. I let you believe I was a secretary. Just like I let you believe Grandpa's old office building was worthless. Just like I let you both think your companies were still yours to control. But my tech platform, Madison stammered, has been losing money for 3 quarters straight. I finished. The only reason you got that last round of funding was because I arranged it through one of my subsidiary investment firms. Trevor was frantically flipping through the documents. Parker Capital, my father's company, has been mine for months, I said quietly. Those risky investments you've been making to cover your losses. I've been buying up the debt, positioning myself for this moment. My mother burst into the room, followed by several other family members, clearly summoned by panicked texts from Trevor and Madison. What's going on? Why are Trevor and Madison saying something about Olivia and OP Holdings? Perfect timing, I said, standing up. Sarah, please show them the presentation. The wall screen came to life, displaying a complex web of companies, investments, and acquisitions, my true empire, built quietly over 8 years while my family thought I was just pushing papers. OP Holdings, I explained to my stunned relatives, currently controls over $500 million in assets across real estate, technology, and private equity. That includes Thomson Corp., Parker Capital, Madison Tech, and about 30 other companies you've never heard of. But how? My mother whispered. Remember Grandpa's worthless office building, the one you all pitied me for inheriting? It came with property rights and mineral claims worth millions. While you were all busy showing off your success, I was building something real. Madison found her voice, anger replacing shock. You deceived us. All those family gatherings, playing the quiet little secretary, like you played the successful tech entrepreneur. I countered, pretending your company wasn't drowning in debt. Or Trevor, bragging about Parker Capital's deals while taking increasingly desperate risks to stay afloat. We were building something, Trevor protested. No, I corrected him. You were playing at building something. You were so busy looking successful that you forgot to actually create success. I turned to the lawyers. Now shall we discuss the terms of the merger? Both companies will be restructured under the OP Holdings umbrella. Current management will be reviewed. You can't do this, Madison whispered. Actually, I can. And I did. While you were all laughing at the quiet secretary, I was learning every aspect of business from the ground up. I was making connections, building relationships, understanding how real power works. My mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me, or would you have tried to take control, just like you did with every other aspect of my life? I opened my briefcase and pulled out an old photograph. Grandpa in his office, teaching me about property rights and quiet power. Grandpa knew what he was doing when he left me that worthless building. He knew I'd understand its real value. The next few hours were a blur of contracts, negotiations, and restructuring plans. By the end, both Madison and Trevor had to admit their companies needed the stability OP Holdings could provide. Their pride was bruised, but their jobs, at least for now, were secure. As the lawyers filed out, my mother lingered. All these years, she said softly, we thought we were the successful ones. Success doesn't always need to announce itself. I replied, remembering Grandpa's words. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most powerful. Over the next few months, things changed dramatically. Madison's tech platform, with proper management and funding, actually began to show promise. Trevor, stripped of his CEO title but retained as an investment advisor, finally started learning the business properly instead of just playing at it. The family dynamics shifted too. The condescending comments stopped. The pitying looks disappeared. At the next family gathering, when someone asked about my work, they listened, really listened, for the first time. My little office building. I kept it, renovating Grandpa's old office, but leaving his desk exactly where it had always been. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit there and remember his lessons about quiet power and patient success. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I found Trevor waiting in the lobby. "I've been thinking," he said, looking humbled. "All those years we spent competing, showing off, we miss what Grandpa was really trying to teach us." I smiled, touching the key I still wore around my neck. "What was that?" "That real success isn't about looking powerful. It's about being powerful. And you built an empire while we were just playing pretend." I thought about all the family dinners, all the condescending comments, all the years of being underestimated. Wanting of the real secret, Trevor? He nodded eagerly. Success doesn't need an audience. It just needs patience, wisdom, and the strength to keep going when everyone else thinks you're failing. As I walked back to my car that night, I looked up at the city skyline, my skyline, though few people knew it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. Sometimes it's proving yourself right, quietly and completely, until they have no choice but to see the truth that was there all along. And sometimes, just sometimes, that truth comes with a $500 million empire and the sweetest vindication of all. Success on your own terms.
The living room of my childhood home felt smaller now, crowded with moving boxes and heavy with 3 decades of memories. The worn leather couch where Dad taught me about investments, the kitchen table where Mom helped with homework. All tagged for the estate sale. "We just couldn't keep up with the property taxes," Mom explained, her voice cracking as she wrapped another photo frame in bubble wrap. "The neighborhood's gotten so expensive since all these tech companies moved in." Dad sat in his old armchair, clutching the realtor's contract like a lifeline. 7 offers over asking price, he said, trying to sound proud instead of devastated. "Everyone wants to tear down these old houses and build modern mansions." I watched them from the bay window seat where I'd spent countless hours reading and later learning to code. They didn't know about the shell company I'd created, or the fact that I'd been quietly buying up properties on our street for the past year. "The couple buying the house seems nice," Mom continued, more to convince herself than me. "Young tech executives. They'll probably modernize everything, but at least they're not developers." I pulled out my phone, opening an app that looked like a standard investment portfolio tracker. In reality, it was a custom interface for managing my real estate holdings. Over $4 billion worth of properties across 3 continents. "About that," I said carefully, "there's something you should know about the buyers." Dad looked up, frowning at my tone. "What do you mean?" "The realtor said they're already approved for the mortgage." "They are," I nodded. "By my bank." "Your bank?" Mom paused her packing. "Honey, I know your tech job pays well, but since when do you own a bank?" I took a deep breath. "Since last year. Along with most of this neighborhood." The realtor's contract slipped from Dad's fingers, floating to the floor like a surrendering flag. "What?" he whispered. I turned my phone's display toward them, showing a map of our neighborhood. Properties highlighted in blue, my properties, covered nearly every lot for 6 blocks. "Remember when I said I was working on some real estate software?" I watched their faces as understanding slowly dawned. It wasn't just software. I've been using predictive analytics to identify undervalued properties before the tech boom drove prices up. Mom sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. But this house, we already signed. With Horizon Properties LC, I finished. My holding company. I'm the buyer, Mom. I've been buying everything in the neighborhood to prevent developers from turning it into luxury condos. Dad picked up the contract with shaking hands, reading the fine print he'd probably skimmed before. His eyes widened as he recognized the corporate structure, the same one he'd taught me about during our Sunday investment lessons years ago. "How?" he managed. "These properties must be worth about $400 million for this neighborhood alone," I said quietly. "But that's just a small part of the portfolio." Mom's face cycled through emotions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally a glimmer of understanding as she looked at my simple clothes. Not the bargain store items she'd assumed, but custom-made pieces that cost more than their mortgage. "Your apartment in the city," she said slowly. "The one you said you were just renting." "I own the building," I admitted. Along with most of that block. The tech companies needed office space and I saw the opportunity before they did. Dad was still staring at the contract, his decades of real estate experience finally kicking in as he recognized the sophisticated legal framework. These clauses. This isn't just property acquisition. This is community preservation, I finished. Every purchase comes with guarantees to maintain the neighborhood's character. No demolitions, no luxury developments. Just careful modernization and affordable housing programs. I stood up, walking to the kitchen where Mom's old recipe box sat among the packing materials. Inside, behind the dog-eared cards, I pulled out a folded document. Remember when you taught me about compound interest, Dad? How you said the key to real estate was buying at the right time. I handed him the paper. My first property purchase agreement, dated 5 years ago. I bought the Wilson house when old Mrs. Wilson needed to move to assisted living. That was you. Mom gasped. But they said some investment company paid her full price and let her stay rent-free until she passed. I nodded. That was my test case. Proof that you could make money in real estate without destroying communities. Dad's hands shook as he read the document. This portfolio structure. It's brilliant. The way you've layered the holdings to maximize tax efficiency while maintaining community control. I had a good teacher, I smiled. All those Sunday lessons about property law and market dynamics? I was paying attention. The afternoon sun streamed through the bay window, highlighting the dust motes dancing around the moving boxes. Outside, children played on the sidewalk. Children whose families could still afford to live here because my company kept rents stable. But why keep it secret? Mom asked, her voice small. Why let us worry about selling the house? I moved to the living room wall where photos chronicled our family history. Because I needed to prove something. Not just to you but to the whole industry. That real estate doesn't have to be about maximizing profit at any cost. Opening my portfolio app again, I showed them the full scope of my holdings. Entire neighborhoods and tech hubs across the country, all managed with the same philosophy. Preserve, protect, profit, in that order. The app you're always checking, Dad realized. It's not social media. It's a command center, I explained. Every property, every tenant, every community initiative, all managed through predictive algorithms I designed. We can spot market trends 6 months before traditional investors, identify at-risk properties before they're even listed. Mom was looking around the living room with new eyes, seeing beyond the moving boxes to the home they thought they were losing. So we don't have to move? Her voice held equal parts hope and uncertainty. Better than that, I said, pulling up another document on my phone. I'm putting the house in a special trust. You'll live here as long as you want, but it's protected. No one can ever tear it down or force you out. Dad's realtor instincts finally kicked in fully. The whole neighborhood. You must have spent less than you'd think, I smiled. When you can predict market movements and automate property management, the margins are actually quite good. Plus, happy tenants make better investments than luxury condos. I walked to the bay window watching as more kids joined the group playing outside. Remember when developers tried to buy the park last year? Wanted to build high-rises. They nodded. The community had fought the plan but lacked the resources to stop it. Check who owns the park now, I said. Along with the community center and the old library. Dad quickly scrolled through the property maps on my phone, his eyes widening. You're not just preserving houses. I'm preserving a community, I finished. The way you always taught me real estate should work. The next hour transformed our living room into something between a corporate boardroom and a family therapy session. Mom kept touching the walls as if to reassure herself they were still hers, while Dad pored over property documents on my tablet, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he absorbed the full scope of my real estate empire. This is extraordinary, he muttered, swiping through financial statements. The way you've structured the holdings, it's like a shield around the entire community. I pulled up a holographic display from my phone, technology my company had developed specifically for urban planning. The neighborhood appeared in miniature above our coffee table, each property glowing with data points. Blue properties are under our direct control, I explained. Green ones are protected through community trusts. Red indicates potential acquisition targets. Mom leaned forward, fascinated despite her lingering shock. The Anderson place is red. Are they selling? They're 3 months behind on their property taxes, I said quietly. But they don't know that we've already paid them through a community assistance program. The kids shouldn't have to leave their school district. The Andersons. Dad's voice caught. They were at our church potluck last week. Never mentioned they were struggling. Most people don't, I said, adjusting the display to show economic stress indicators across the neighborhood. That's why we built an AI system to predict financial hardship before it becomes critical. We've prevented 27 foreclosures in this neighborhood alone last year. A notification popped up on my phone. Another property acquisition had just completed in Seattle. My empire grew by another $50 million, but I dismissed the alert. Today wasn't about money. But how did you start all this? Mom asked, still trying to reconcile her daughter's success with her memories of my childhood bedroom coding sessions. Property isn't cheap even 5 years ago. I smiled, pulling up an old photo on my phone. Remember this? They leaned in to see a teenage version of myself standing proudly in front of a rickety food truck. My first business venture, selling smoothies at tech conferences. That silly smoothie truck? Mom looked confused. The one we thought was just a summer job? That silly truck was parked outside major tech companies every day, I explained. I wasn't just selling smoothies. I was gathering data. Listening to developers talk about which neighborhoods their companies were expanding into. Then I wrote an algorithm to predict property values based on tech sector growth. Dad's eyes widened with understanding. You saw the boom coming. Better than that, I pulled up another document. I helped shape it. Those smoothie customers. They became my first investors. They trusted my market analysis because I understood both tech and real estate. The hologram shifted to show my first major acquisition. A seemingly worthless block of warehouses that now housed one of the city's biggest tech campuses. $10 million in seed funding became $50 million in property value within 6 months, I continued. Then $100 million, then $1 billion. But I never forgot what you taught me, Dad. Real estate isn't just about buildings. It's about people. Mom was staring at the moving boxes scattered around the room. So all this packing was unnecessary, I admitted. But I needed to understand how it felt. What families go through when they think they're losing their homes. It's helped me design better protection programs. A gentle chime from my phone interrupted us. My assistant reminding me about the board meeting I was technically supposed to be attending. Speaking of programs, I said, pulling up a new document, there's something else you should see. The hologram transformed into a detailed plan for the neighborhood's future. Not sterile modern developments, but thoughtfully upgraded homes maintaining their historic character. Community gardens in empty lots, small business incubators in unused spaces, and most importantly, guaranteed affordable housing for long-term residents. This is what we're actually going to do with the neighborhood, I explained. Not tear it down but lift it up. And I want you both to help run it. Us. Dad's voice cracked slightly. But we're just the people who taught me that community matters, I finished. Who showed me that real success isn't about how much you own, but how many people you can help. The sunset painted our old living room in shades of gold, casting long shadows across the moving boxes that now seemed more like props in an elaborate play. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications, property closings, market updates, board member inquiries, but for once I let them wait. There's something else you need to see, I said, pulling up a new holographic display. Remember the Henderson building downtown? Dad's expression darkened. The one that forced out all those small businesses last year? Turned them into luxury boutiques. Check the ownership records as of this morning. He tapped through the documents, then froze. You didn't. I did, I nodded. And the first thing we're doing is inviting all those businesses back. With 10-year leases at their original rates. Mom wiped tears from her eyes. The bakery where we got your birthday cakes. Opens again next month, I smiled. Along with Mr. Chen's bookstore and the old music shop. Some things are worth more than maximizing rent per square foot. A sleek black car pulled up outside. My chief operations officer arriving with the community development team. I'd scheduled this meeting weeks ago, knowing my parents would need to see the bigger picture. Come with me, I said, standing up. There's something I want to show you. As we walked outside, Neighbors peeked from their windows, probably wondering about the expensive vehicle and well-dressed executives in their modest street. Mrs. Anderson was watering her flowers, trying not to look worried about her property taxes. Taxes she didn't know were already taken care of. Sarah, Paisio greeted me with a tablet in hand. The Singapore acquisition just closed. You're now the largest community-focused real estate holder in Southeast Asia. Mom stumbled slightly at the casual mention of international holdings. Dad caught her arm, his own expression a mix of pride and lingering shock. Perfect timing, I said, taking the tablet. Pull up Project Phoenix. The holographic display expanded, showing not just our neighborhood but the entire city. Blue Properties, My Properties, created a web of protected communities throughout every district. Every highlighted area represents a neighborhood we've saved from developers, I explained. But more importantly, look at the green zones. Dad leaned in, his real estate experience helping him understand first. These are enterprise zones, community development districts. The future, I corrected. Each green zone is a self-sustaining community hub. Local businesses, affordable housing, education centers, and green spaces, all protected by my company's legal framework. The development team spread out more displays, showing detailed plans for each area. Modern amenities seamlessly integrated with historic architecture. Community gardens on every block. Free Wi-Fi and technology education centers in repurposed buildings. But this must cost. Mom began. Less than you think, I said. Without greedy developers, sustainable growth works better. Happy residents stay, care for their homes, and attract good businesses. Mrs. Anderson stopped pretending to water her flowers. I waved her over. Remember you wanted to run for the community council? She nodded. The election's today, I said, just as cars pulled up with neighbors, business owners, and leaders I'd quietly supported for months. Dad frowned. What's happening? The first meeting of the Community Preservation Council, I said, handing him a folder. I want you to lead it. Inside was a plan for ethical, community-led development. Everything he'd dreamed of doing. I was listening to those Sunday lessons, Dad, I said. I just made them bigger. Mom recognized faces from church and school. They're all staying, she asked. They're protected, I said. And soon we'll do this in every city we work in. My phone buzzed. More communities joining us. The empire was growing, but in a way that served people. Dad looked at the moving boxes. You knew we wouldn't need them? I glanced at our home and the gathering crowd. Sometimes you have to almost lose something to know its value. The emergency room doors burst open at 3 a.m., fluorescent lights harsh against the sterile walls. Paramedics rushed in with a patient clutching his chest, my father, though they didn't know that yet. I watched from the attending physician's station, my white coat crisp, the name Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Chief of Surgery, clearly embroidered above the pocket. Male, 65, severe chest pain, possible cardiac event, the paramedic announced. My father's voice, strained but still commanding, cut through the chaos. I need the best. Get me your chief of surgery. Now. I could still hear his words from 10 years ago, echoing in my mind as I watched the scene unfold. Medical school? Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. You can barely handle basic science. Be practical. Take the business degree we offered. Mom had nodded in agreement that day, both of them sitting in our luxury living room, disappointed as usual. Doctor, study for years, dear. You've never been good at long-term commitment. I straightened my stethoscope, checking my father's preliminary readings on the tablet. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter they said would never finish pre-med was now running one of the country's top cardiac units. Stats dropping, a nurse called out. BP 160/90 and rising. My father's face was pale, but his trademark scowl remained. Where is your chief of surgery? Do you know who I am? I'm Richard Mitchell. Page Dr. Mitchell, I instructed the nurse, maintaining my professional distance. She knew the protocol we'd discussed for this possibility. Sir, the nurse smiled at my father. She's right here. I stepped forward, charts in hand. Hello, Dad. The monitor's steady beeping punctuated the sudden silence. My father's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing without sound. The expensive watch he'd always used to check impatiently during our arguments caught the overhead lights as his hand trembled. "Sarah," he finally managed. You're a nurse?" "Chief of surgery, actually," I corrected, reviewing his EKG. "For the past 2 years. Those medical conferences Mom said I was lying about. I was speaking at them." Another nurse appeared with additional test results. "Dr. Mitchell, the preliminary cardiac enzymes are ready." "Sarah, this is absurd," Dad started, trying to sit up. "You can't be." "Dr. Mitchell," I corrected again, my voice professional. "And please lie still. You're showing clear signs of cardiac distress." The memory of my medical school acceptance letter, the one they'd laughed at, flashed through my mind. They'd been so certain I'd fail out in the first semester. Instead, I'd graduated top of my class. "Get another doctor," he demanded, though his voice was weaker now. "A real." "Dad," I cut him off, "you're having a heart attack. I'm the best cardiac surgeon in this hospital, and right now I'm your doctor. We can discuss your disappointment in my career choice after I save your life." His face paled further as the severity of his situation sank in. The monitors chirped more urgently. "Prep or 3, I ordered. "Full cardiac team stat." "You can't do this," he protested weakly. "You're not, you never." "Actually, I did," I said, making notes in his chart. "Every time you and Mom told me I couldn't, I did. Every doubt, every dismissal, every mockery of my unrealistic dreams, they all pushed me to work harder." The nurses efficiently prepared him for transfer, their movements precise under my leadership. I'd trained them personally, built this department into a national center of excellence, all while my parents believed I was probably waiting tables somewhere. "BP continuing to rise," a nurse warned. "I'm going to save your life, Dad," I said clearly, meeting his confused eyes. "Not because you believed in me, you never did. But because I believed in myself, and because I took an oath to help every patient who comes through those doors. Even you." The transport team arrived to move him to surgery. 10 years of dismissal and doubt hung between us in the fluorescent lights. "Sarah," he whispered, fear finally breaking through his pride. "That's Dr. Mitchell," I corrected one final time. "And we'll talk after surgery. Right now, I have work to do." As they wheeled him toward the OR, I could see the questions in his eyes. How had his unreliable daughter become the person holding his life in her hands? The same hands he'd said weren't steady enough for medicine were about to perform complex cardiac surgery. I turned to my team, professional mask firmly in place. "Prep for emergency bypass. And someone contact Mrs. Mitchell, tell her to get here quickly." It was time to show my father exactly what his impractical daughter could do. The operating room hummed with familiar tension as I scrubbed in, my movements precise after thousands of similar procedures. Through the window, I could see my team preparing my father, the man who'd once said my hands were too clumsy for real medical work. Dr. Mitchell, my lead surgical resident, approached. "Your mother just arrived. She's demanding to speak with the chief of surgery." "Of course she is," I murmured, carefully scrubbing under my nails. "Tell her the chief is preparing to operate on her husband." She doesn't know it's you, does she?" "No," I replied, drying my hands. "She thinks I'm running a small clinic in Chicago. That's what they tell their friends at the country club." The surgical nurse helped me into my gown and gloves. Through the OR doors, I could hear my mother's voice rising in the corridor. "This is ridiculous. My husband needs the best surgeon available." I stepped into the operating room, the familiar weight of responsibility settling over me. My father lay prepped and draped, tubes and monitors surrounding him. The anesthesiologist nodded. Everything was ready. "Scalpel," I said clearly, and the instrument slapped into my palm with practiced precision. As I made the initial incision, memories flooded back. Mom tearing up my anatomy textbooks because they were distasteful. Dad calling my pre-med advisor to say I was dropping out. I wasn't. Their faces when I told them I'd been accepted to residency at Mass General. Pure disbelief followed by accusations that I must have cheated. "Retractor," I called, and my team moved in perfect synchronization. The OR doors burst open. My mother, having somehow gotten past security, stood frozen in the doorway. Her designer outfit clashed harshly with the sterile environment. "You can't be," she whispered, recognition dawning. "Mrs. Mitchell, you need to leave the OR immediately," My charge nurse moved to intercept her. That's Sarah? That's Dr. Mitchell, my surgical resident corrected firmly, guiding her out. And she's performing extremely delicate surgery. The doors swung shut on her shocked face and I refocused on the task at hand. My father's heart lay exposed before me, damaged but salvageable. Just like my dream of becoming a doctor had been, despite their best efforts to destroy it. Multiple blockages, I noted, my voice steady. We'll need to. The monitor alarmed. BP dropping. My anesthesiologist called. He's crashing, someone said. In that moment I wasn't their disappointing daughter. I was simply a surgeon doing what I'd trained years to do. My hands moved with practiced skill, making decisions and adjustments that would determine whether my father lived or died. Push one of AP, I ordered, my voice calm despite the crisis. And get me the bypass machine ready. For 6 hours I worked. Every stitch, every graft, every decision proved what they'd never believed, that I was born for this. My team watched in admiration as I handled complications that would have challenged lesser surgeons. Beautiful work, Dr. Mitchell, my assistant surgeon murmured as I placed the final suture. Thank you, I replied, stepping back to survey my work. Close for me. I need to speak with Mrs. Mitchell. I found my mother in the waiting room, her makeup streaked with tears. She stood as I approached, her eyes fixed on the name embroidered on my coat. Sarah? All this time. Your husband's surgery was successful, I said professionally. We encountered multiple complications, but I was able to repair all the damage. He should make a full recovery. You're really a doctor? The chief of surgery. Youngest in the hospital's history, I confirmed. Those years when you thought I'd failed? I was completing my residency, earning my fellowships, building my department. She sank back into her chair. But you never told us. You never asked, I replied simply. You were too busy telling everyone I was a disappointment. A nurse appeared with post-op reports for me to sign. Dr. Mitchell, your 4 p.m. valve replacement is being prepped. Thank you, Lisa. Push it an hour. I need to monitor this recovery personally. My mother watched this exchange with dawning comprehension. All those medical conferences Richard gets invited to. I'm usually a keynote speaker, I confirmed. Though I use my married name professionally. That's probably why you never noticed. Married? You're to another surgeon. We met during my fellowship at Johns Hopkins. That's another life event you missed, being too busy assuming I was failing. The recovery room called. My father was waking up. I turned to go, then paused. Mom, next time you're at the country club, telling people what a disappointment I am, remember that your husband is alive because of that disappointment. 3 days later, I stood in my father's private recovery room, reviewing his charts. The monitors showed strong vital signs, my work was holding perfectly. He watched me silently, still processing the reality that his unreliable daughter had saved his life. Your cardiac function is improving, I said professionally, making notes. The grafts are holding well and your numbers are exactly where I want them. Sarah. He started. Dr. Mitchell. I corrected automatically, not looking up from the charts. You've said that every day since the surgery, my father muttered, his voice tight with frustration. And you've refused to recognize the truth every day since the surgery, I replied quietly, finally meeting his gaze with resolve. The same way you refused to acknowledge my graduation from medical school. Or when I finished my residency. Or when I was appointed chief of surgery here. He opened his mouth to speak, but a knock interrupted us. Dr. James Chin, my husband and the hospital's head of neurosurgery, stepped into the room. His posture was formal, every inch the professional he was. Dr. Mitchell, he said, using my title deliberately and respectfully, the board meeting is beginning. They're waiting for their chief of surgery. My father's eyes widened. Board meeting. Yes, I answered, reaching into my bag. I placed a folded newspaper in his hands. The hospital has the highest cardiac survival rate in the country. The board tends to listen when I have something to say. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper. His eyes landed on the bold headline, Mitchell Cardiac Center receives presidential recognition for revolutionary surgical techniques. That's named after me, I said evenly. Not you. I built this center. Every protocol. Every procedure. Every innovation. Those are my ideas. My research. My name. My mother appeared in the doorway at that moment. She looked tired, older somehow, as though the last week of watching me work had finally opened her eyes to the daughter standing in front of her. Sarah, sweetheart. Dr. Mitchell, she corrected herself. The nurses were telling me about your research program. The one you said was a distraction? I lifted my tablet and brought up the data. Vital statistics and national outcomes scrolled across the screen. This program has transformed cardiac care across the country. Lives that would have been lost are now being saved every single day. My father shifted uncomfortably. Why didn't you tell us? I let out a soft, almost sad laugh. Tell you? I did tell you, Dad. I told you about every milestone. Every small win. Every success. You just didn't listen. You were too busy telling me to focus on a real career, to hear any of it. James touched my elbow gently. They really are waiting, love. One moment. I turned back to my parents, my white coat catching the light like polished armor. Do you want to know what the hardest part of operating on you was? My mother's breath caught. My father said nothing. It wasn't the surgery, I continued. That was routine. That's what I do. The hardest part was knowing that even with your heart literally in my hands, you still wouldn't believe in me. Even then, I had to earn your respect. The only sounds in the room came from the steady beeping of the cardiac monitor. The night you came in, you demanded the best surgeon, I said softly. You got her. And not because I'm your daughter, but in spite of it. I stopped living to prove something to you. I became who I am by proving it to myself. Another knock. A nurse stepped in with a stack of files. Dr. Mitchell, the new research grant has been approved. Congratulations. Also, the First Lady's office called regarding your appointment to the Presidential Medical Advisory Board. I signed the documents quickly, professionally. My mother gasped softly in the doorway. Your recovery is on track, I told my father, shifting fully back into my role. Dr. Rodriguez will check on you during evening rounds. I have back-to-back surgeries the rest of the day. I turned to leave, but my father's voice stopped me. Sarah, Dr. Mitchell, the night you operated, were you scared? Operating on your own father. I paused and looked back at him, my expression calm. No, Dad. I wasn't scared. The operating room is the one place I've always felt confident. It's the one place where your doubts and Mom's disbelief couldn't reach me. In there I belong. James gently touched the small of my back. The board, he reminded gently. I nodded. Right. I stepped toward the door, then glanced back one last time. Mom, Dad, I have a hospital to run. If you need anything, your nurses know how to reach me. And Dad. I let a small, genuine smile tug at my lips. Next time you ask for the best surgeon in the country, try believing it might actually be your daughter. We stepped out into the hallway, 2 doctors in step, coat to coat, shoulder to shoulder. As the door closed behind us, I heard my mother quietly begin to cry. They're reading about you right now, James said quietly as we walked. All the published research, the awards, the innovations. Everything they ignored while doubting what you could do. I smiled, brushing my fingers lightly over the embroidered name on my coat. Good, I said. Dad's recovery will take weeks. They'll have plenty of time to learn who their daughter really is. And every doctor, nurse, and intern who walks into that room will call me Mitchell. And if they ask about your next surgery? He asked as we reached the boardroom doors. I lifted my chin and answered without hesitation. Tell them what I tell every patient's family, that they're in the hands of the best cardiac surgeon in the country, whether they choose to believe it or not. The doors opened. The department heads and senior physicians rose from their seats as I entered, eyes full of respect and expectation. Not a single one of them questioned my place here. I took my seat at the head of the table. Let's begin, I said clearly, lifting the first file. Starting with the expansion plans for the Mitchell Cardiac Center. The Aspen Winter Gathering was in full swing at my family's exclusive mountain chalet, a property they'd bragged about for years. The champagne was flowing, the caviar was imported, and the condescension, as always, came complimentary. So, Alexandra, Dad began, swirling his crystal glass, still playing with those airplane models? I adjusted my cashmere turtleneck, hand-tailored from my own luxury aviation wear line, though they'd never recognize it. The chalet's great room felt stifling, filled with their desperate attempts to maintain their image of old-money aviation royalty. "It's not playing, Dad," I replied, checking my phone as another alert flashed. My company had just processed more private flights in the last hour than their entire fleet handled in a year. "I'm building something." "Building?" My sister Victoria laughed, her diamond-encrusted watch catching the firelight. "Leasing 2 small planes isn't building, darling. It's barely even trying." If they only knew those 2 small planes were just a cover for Skyline Enterprises, the largest private aviation empire in history. That their precious Thompson Aviation was about to become a footnote in my company's portfolio. "You need to be realistic," Mom chimed in, signaling for more champagne. "Victoria's running Thompson Aviation's international division. That's real aviation." Dad nodded proudly. 30 years I've built this company. Now Victoria's carrying on the legacy while you're playing entrepreneur with toy planes. My phone buzzed discreetly. A message from my COO. "Acquisition complete. All Thompson Aviation assets transferred. Awaiting your signal." "How many jets in the Thompson fleet now, Victoria?" I asked innocently. 57, she preened. "Largest private fleet in the Northeast. Just added 3 Gulfstreams last month." I hid my smile behind my champagne glass. 57? Skyline process that many takeoffs every hour. "And Alexandra?" Victoria's husband James asked with mock concern. "How many planes in your, what do you call it, airplane rental business?" Before I could answer, the chalet's intercom crackled to life. "Thompson 1 requesting clearance for landing at private strip. Standing by for owner confirmation." Dad reached for the intercom but static cut him off. "Authorization denied," a new voice announced. "Thompson 1 now registered under Skyline Enterprises. Awaiting clearance from CEO Alexandra Thompson." The silence that fell over the room was deafening. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the imported marble floor. What is this?" Dad stammered. I stood slowly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows as Thompson 1, their prized corporate jet, descended toward the private airstrip. "That would be my plane now. Along with the other 56 in your fleet." "Your plane?" Mom's voice cracked. "That's impossible. Skyline Enterprises is the largest private aviation company in the world," I finished for her. "Worth about $300 billion as of market close today. Though with this acquisition we'll probably hit $350 billion by morning." Victoria's diamond watch suddenly looked very cheap compared to the empire her failing sister had built. "This is a joke," she sputtered. You don't." I pressed the intercom. "Skyline Actual. Authorization granted. Welcome to the fleet, Thompson 1. "Thank you, Ms. Thompson," the pilot replied. "The rest of the Thompson fleet is being rebranded as we speak. Skyline logos are being applied at all terminals." Dad's face went from red to white. "All terminals?" "Yes, Dad," I smiled. "Every Thompson Aviation plane, hangar and facility now belongs to Skyline. Those toy planes you mocked? They just bought your entire company." But this was just the beginning. They hadn't seen my real empire yet. The private airstrip lights flickered as Thompson 1, now Skyline Prime, touched down, its fresh Skyline logos gleaming in the winter sunset. The family's prized jet was the first visible sign of their crumbling aviation dynasty. And I was just getting started. The chalet's great room transformed from a family gathering into an impromptu command center as my executive team entered. The expensive furniture was quickly rearranged to accommodate holographic displays showing real-time flight data across the globe, all powered by Skyline's proprietary technology. "Miss Thompson," my CEO Michael Chin approached, carrying advanced tablets. "Global operations are transitioning smoothly. All Thompson Aviation assets are being integrated into Skyline's network. Their technology is, well, let's say vintage." Dad gripped his whiskey glass tighter. "Vintage? We just upgraded our entire fleet management system last year." "To technology Skyline considered obsolete 3 years ago," I corrected. "That state-of-the-art tracking system you're so proud of? My company processes more flight data in 10 minutes than Thompson Aviation handles in a year." Victoria stood up, her perfect composure cracking. "This is ridiculous. We have contracts, partnerships. All now under Skyline's control. I cut her off, nodding to Michael, who activated the chalet's full display system, another Skyline innovation they'd never noticed. The walls came alive with data. Thousands of aircraft crisscrossing the globe, advanced manufacturing facilities, space aviation initiatives, and technological breakthroughs that made traditional private aviation look like the Wright brothers' first attempt. Every private jet you see in the sky, I explained to my stunned family, every charter flight, every luxury air service, 80% of it runs on Skyline's infrastructure. We don't just own planes, we control the entire private aviation ecosystem. Ms. Thompson, Sarah, my chief innovation officer, entered. NASA's director is on line 1 about the Lunar Shuttle program. Mom's crystal glass slipped from her fingers. Lunar Shuttle? His mom. While Victoria was bragging about 3 new Gulfstreams, I was designing the first private spacecraft fleet. Those toy planes you mocked? They're evolving into interplanetary vessels. The displays showed Skyline's next-generation projects. Hypersonic jets, orbital shuttles, and aviation technologies that were redefining the boundaries of flight. Your pilot certification, Victoria? I continued, watching her flinch. It's being re-evaluated. Skyline's standards are somewhat higher than Thompson's rather relaxed requirements. Re-evaluated. She stood up, outraged. I'm the best pilot in the company. We're the best pilot, I corrected. Let's review your actual flight record, shall we? Michael projected Victoria's flight history onto the screens. Covered up incidents, ignored safety protocols, and mediocre performance that Dad had painted as excellence. That near miss over the Atlantic last year? I raised an eyebrow. The one Dad buried with his connections? Skyline's AI detected it within seconds of acquiring your records. That's classified information. Victoria protested. Nothing is classified from Skyline's systems. We track every aircraft, every flight path, every decision made in the air. Those close calls you thought were hidden? We've had them documented for months. Dad finally found his voice. The board won't stand for this. The board. I laughed softly. They approved the sale unanimously. After seeing Skyline's technology, they practically begged to be acquired. Would you like to know what they really think of Thompson Aviation's management? The screens shifted to show confidential board communications, scathing critiques of Dad's leadership, concerns about Victoria's competence, and desperate attempts to modernize before becoming obsolete. Ms. Thompson, Michael interrupted, the Space Division needs your approval for the Mars transport prototype. Space Division? James whispered. Yes, dear brother-in-law. Those unrealistic dreams you ridiculed at last year's Christmas party? They're now Skyline's fastest-growing segment. We're not just changing aviation, we're revolutionizing space travel. The displays showed massive hangars housing spacecraft prototypes, testing facilities that dwarfed anything Thompson Aviation had ever built, and revolutionary propulsion systems that would make traditional jets obsolete. Your office at Thompson headquarters, Victoria? I continued. It's being converted into Skyline's AI flight control center. Don't worry. We found you a nice desk in the charter booking department. Booking department? Her voice cracked. But I'm the international division head. We're the division head, I emphasized. Skyline doesn't maintain positions based on family names. You'll need to earn your place like everyone else. The screens displayed real-time updates as Thompson Aviation's assets were absorbed into Skyline's empire. Hangars being rebranded, aircraft being upgraded, and staff being retrained in Skyline's advanced systems. Speaking of earning your place, I nodded to Michael, who distributed new employment contracts. Let's discuss your future roles in my company. The contracts made their previous positions look like internships. Dad's face grew paler with each page he turned. This is entry-level, he sputtered. Stat. You'll be joining our ground operations team. Victoria, the flight attendant training program has an opening. Mom, the terminal services department needs staff. Terminal services? Mom's voice was barely audible. Consider it an education, I smiled. You always said I needed to understand aviation from the ground up. Now you can do the same literally. But the real shock was still to come. The luxury chalet had become mission control, its panoramic windows offering a perfect view as more Thompson Aviation jets landed, each one now bearing Skyline's distinctive logo. But I wasn't done. The real devastation was about to begin. "Ms. Thompson," Michael announced, "the Global Aviation Summit livestream is ready. They're waiting for your keynote on the future of flight." "Perfect timing," I smiled, standing as the displays transformed into a direct feed to Dubai. Aviation industry leaders, aerospace pioneers, and government officials waited for my address. "Distinguished colleagues," I began, watching Mom's perfect makeup run as she realized her delusional daughter was addressing the world's aviation elite. "Skyline's acquisition of Thompson Aviation marks the beginning of our complete transformation of global private flight." Victoria's hands trembled as she watched billionaires and heads of state nod along to my every word. "Remember when you said I'd never understand real aviation, Dad?" I turned to him during a pause. "Pay attention, you might learn something about the future of flight." The screens filled with Skyline's revolutionary systems, AI-powered flight control, quantum navigation, and aerospace technologies that made traditional aviation look primitive. "As of tonight," I continued, addressing both Dubai and my family, "Skyline Enterprises controls 80% of global private aviation. Every charter flight, every private jet, every luxury air service, it all operates through our network." James, Victoria's husband, sank deeper into his chair. "But that means your precious fleet management system?" I smiled. "It's been running on my technology all along. Those advanced navigation tools you bragged about? They're simplified versions of Skyline's basic systems." The displays showed real-time flight data, thousands of aircraft coordinated by Skyline's quantum computers every second. "Ms. Thompson," Sarah rushed in, "the European Space Agency is requesting immediate consultation on their private space transport integration." Dad's aviation empire dreams suddenly seemed very small as he watched his daughter casually discuss revolutionizing space travel. "Your new employment agreements," I turned back to my family, "require complete retraining in Skyline systems. That means learning how real aviation technology works." Michael distributed updated documents, terms that made their previous roles look like paper airplane competitions. "These positions are probationary," I explained. "No more hiding behind the Thompson name, Victoria. No more covering up incidents with Dad's connections." "But I've been flying for 15 years. Victoria protested. "In obsolete aircraft," I corrected. "Skyline's entry-level pilots understand more about modern aviation than Thompson's entire flight crew." The screens displayed their new roles in excruciating detail, basic positions requiring extensive retraining and actual merit-based advancement. "Ms. Thompson," Sarah interrupted, "the Mars Transport Division is ready for your review. And the Lunar Shuttle Network is online." "Lunar Shuttle?" Dad choked on his whiskey. "Stat. While you were bragging about your 57 jets, I was establishing humanity's first interplanetary transportation network. Those model planes you mocked? They're now connecting Earth to the stars." The displays showed Skyline's space initiatives, orbital stations, lunar bases, and Martian landing pads that redefined the meaning of private aviation. "By the way," I added, "those flight incidents you covered up? They're being investigated. All of them. Even the ones you think we don't know about." Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. "You can't." "I can, and I did. Skyline's AI found some interesting safety violations. The FAA will be very interested in our findings." Mom tried one last appeal. "Alexandra, darling, surely we can discuss this as family." "Family?" I laughed. "Like when you discussed my future at the country club, telling everyone I was wasting my potential on aviation startups. Or when Victoria told her pilot friends I was playing with toy planes." The screens showed more breaking news. Skyline Enterprises CEO Alexandra Thompson becomes aviation's first trillionaire, revolutionizes global flight. "Trillionaire," James whispered, loosening his tie. "Yes, dear brother-in-law. That hobby you mocked built something bigger than your entire family's fortune multiplied by 1,000. Want to see what else your delusional sister-in-law owns?" Michael began displaying Skyline's complete portfolio. Aerospace companies, manufacturing facilities, space ventures, an empire that spanned Earth and reached into the solar system. "Your precious Thompson Aviation?" I continued, It's being completely restructured. The name will remain as a case study in aviation history museums. The displays showed the transformation plans. Thompson's outdated hangars becoming Skyline's quantum computing centers, their traditional terminals converted to spacecraft launching facilities. But our clients, Victoria started, are already Skyline clients, I cut her off. Have been for years. Every flight they booked went through our systems. We just let Thompson Aviation pretend they were still relevant. Just then, every phone in the room buzzed, global news alerts about Skyline's latest innovation. Personal flying vehicles that would revolutionize urban transportation. That's right, I confirmed, watching their faces. While you were proud of your little fleet, I was reinventing human flight itself. Sarah displayed the market reactions. Traditional aviation companies collapsing as Skyline's new technologies rendered them obsolete. Thompson Aviation would have been one of them, if I hadn't bought it first. One final detail. I stood, smoothing my turtleneck. That private airstrip you're so proud of? It's being converted to a spacecraft launch facility. But don't worry, you'll still get to see it. We will. Victoria asked hopefully. Yes. The maintenance crew works night shifts. I smiled. Welcome to the future of aviation, where success isn't inherited, it's earned. Something you're all about to learn the hard way. Walking toward the door, I paused at the threshold. Oh, and that members-only pilots club you love so much? Skyline just bought it. Your memberships are being reassessed. The displays showed one final headline: The New Queen of the Skies. How Alexandra Thompson built a trillion-dollar empire while her family mocked her dreams. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success so massive it forces your critics to work for you. And I was just getting started. As if to emphasize my point, a sonic boom shook the chalet windows. One of Skyline's hypersonic jets streaked across the evening sky, leaving Thompson Aviation's old fleet looking like vintage propeller planes. The future of flight had arrived. And the Thompson family was about to learn what real aviation looked like, from the ground floor up.